If you have a new world, you need a new church. We have a new world. This is the way that Brian McLaren, a friend of this congregation, opens up his book, The Church on the Other Side. For any of you who've taken a high school geology class, you may remember that our Earth is formed on top of a series of tectonic plates that are constantly moving and shaking and shifting and forming and reforming our Earth. And at those places where they converge, and especially at times when they're doing a little bit of moving, they're often bumping up and jostling up against each other, one pushing up on top of the other. And if you're at those edges where those tectonic shifts happen, you feel the earthquakes and the tremors and the lava flows right there beneath your feet as the world seems to open up, right? Well, in the same way, civilization goes through very similar shifts. They remain just moving a little bit all the time, but at times there are these tectonic shifts, right, where everything seems to change and nothing seems to be the same, and we look down and our feet are shaking and it is dizzying for us. Listen to the way Brian McLaren puts it. You and I happen to have been born at an edge, at a time of high tectonic activity in history. It's the end of one age and the beginning of another. It is a time of shaking. Yesterday's maps are already outdated, and today's soon will be too. The uncharted world ahead of us is what we will call the new world on the other side. The other side of 2 world wars and 1 Cold War. The other side of communism and theological liberalism. The other side of the 2nd millennium and modernism. There used to be an old world and then a new world and then the 3rd world, but now all 3 are being swept up in the new world. Or on a slightly grander scale, there used to be a prehistoric world, an ancient world, a medieval world, and a modern world, but now all 4 are being swept up in the postmodern world. I mean, just think about it for a minute. Think about all of the changes, how much different our life is, how much different this world is just from the last about 100 years, the span of one itsy human life. Think about how much different our world is just because of the advent of the automobile. Think about how different our life is because of plane travel and space travel. Think about how different our world and our life is ever since the computer came along, or television, or internet, or our cell phones. Think about the difference in our life with all of the medical advancements that have taken place in the last 100 years. All of the scientific advancements and military advancements. How much different our world is because of the atomic bomb. And when these tectonic seismic shifts take place, everything is affected and everything changes. Listen to Brian McLaren again. If you are a Christian of any sort, liberal, conservative, evangelical, mainline, Catholic, Protestant, hand clapper, non-clapper, devotee of pipe organ or keyboard, piano or guitar, or even if you're not a Christian, you recognize that these grinding, shifting, transitional times have shaken the church. It is unsettled, imbalanced, nervous, reeling, sometimes oblivious, but more often these days, wide-eyed and open-mouthed, with speechless anxiety, wondering when the shaking will be over. Is the church a dinosaur at the end of the Jurassic? Will it survive the changes? A couple years ago, our denomination, PCUSA, did a year-long study, and when the results came in, they summarized all that they had found in this study on the state of the church in just 4 words. Our iceberg is shrinking. The truth of the matter is that all across the country, in all of our denominations, less people are coming to church, and those who come are coming less often. The world and our society are becoming much more secular, and people more often are apt to put down agnostic or atheist or spiritual but non-religious in the surveys that they fill out. For the last couple of 100 years, the church, particularly the mainline church, particularly the Presbyterian church, has been entrenched in the midst of the sacred hallowed halls of power of this country. We are the ones who get invited into the Oval Office to pray with the presidents and to be the chaplain of the U.S. Senate. Many of our senators and congressmen are Presbyterians. Many of our presidents have either been Presbyterians or when they start getting serious about their political career, like Ronald Reagan, they join BPC and then join Bel Air. Because if you're going to be a successful lawyer or doctor or politician or kind of anything, you need to be joining a mainline church. And if it's Presbyterian, that much better. Not so much anymore, huh? Today, so many people look at the church from the outside and they think that we're archaic and stuffy and outdated, that we are mean-hearted and judgmental, mean-spirited, that we are outdated, that we are irrelevant. Isn't it true? And yet, if there's one thing that we know, that spiritual hunger, it never goes away. Because as human beings, this is who we are. We are a people, no matter how secular we become, we are a people who are in search of God. We are still asking the questions, who am I and why am I here? What is my purpose for being put on this earth? And so we continue to search. And if history has told us anything, it's that if people can't find good religion, they will have no qualms turning to bad religion. The rise that we're seeing around the world of violent, radical fundamentalism, not just in the Middle East, but here in our country and in all places and all sorts of religions, makes that stand out that much more clearly, how important it is that we need good religion, right? If we have a new world, and we have a new world, we need a new church, or at least a new way of doing church. This doesn't mean that we need a totally new religion, but a new framework for thinking about religion. We may not need a new spirit, but a new kind of spirituality. We certainly don't need a new Christ, but a new way of being Christian. And I hope that we're not going to need a new denomination, but a new kind of church in every denomination. Because the gospel of Jesus Christ, that never goes out of style. That never becomes outdated. Jesus' gospel is as relevant and attractive and right and true as it's ever been. But we need to always be finding new ways to do church, new ways to address what's going on in the world around us, to bring that gospel to life in the context in which we find ourselves. That's what we mean by reformed and always reforming. That the church must always be on the lookout for the ways that it needs to adjust and change. It's been happening for thousands of years. The church in the book of Acts looks nothing like the church of the early Roman Empire or the early Middle Ages or the late Middle Ages or the Renaissance or the Industrial Revolution or the Enlightenment or the modern era or now in the postmodern era. This has been happening even before Jesus himself. In 605 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon conquered Jerusalem. And because they kept fighting back and trying to kick them out, they finally took up a whole bunch of the Jews and they deported them and exiled them back in Babylon. This was a seismic, tectonic kind of shift for the people of Israel and for the Jewish faith. And yet, during that time, there was this incredible evolution of their faith, and so many things that happened in the Jewish faith, that evolved in the Jewish faith, came during that time of seismic change for them. It was an incredible time of literary advancement. It was there in that exile that many of the books of the Old Testament were written, books like Esther and Ezra and Nehemiah and Daniel and Isaiah. It was there during that exile that they put the final edits on the Pentateuch, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. It was also during that time that they finalized the Hebrew alphabet. Because they were away from the temple in Jerusalem where all of the worship had been centered, there was less and less emphasis on the priesthood and more emphasis on a new kind of Jewish leadership that was beginning to emerge called the rabbi, who would teach and preach in a place that wasn't centered in the temple, but in these new places that they called synagogues. And as the temple's role diminished, so did the role of animal sacrifice as part of worship. And it became more and more about preaching and teaching and reading the Word of God. The Talmud was written during this time. And through it all, Isaiah says this: "See, I am doing a new thing. Right now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." New maps were being drawn for the people of Israel during that time of tectonic seismic shift in their civilization. So what are our new maps going to look like here in the Christian church? What will it look like for us on the other side of these seismic shifts that we're going through? One of the things that I've always loved so much about BPC is I think for the last 30 years or so, they've actually been at the cutting edge of at least trying to live into some of these key shifts that are taking place and are going to continue more and more to take place in the church. I don't know exactly what this emerging church out of this church on the other side is going to look like, but what I do know is that it's going to be more open and welcoming. I think one thing we know for sure is that we can't any longer take for granted that Christianity and faith is people's starting point. That people are going to come to us and be grateful for the opportunity to come to us because they already believe, or their parents want them to believe, or their society wants them to believe, or they think that this is the way to be a good person. We are going to need to go back to scratch and convince people why faith matters. Convince people of the difference that God can make in their life. That this is the thing that they've been searching for. That this is the way to have a rich and full and content and satisfied life. We are going to need to show people. We talk a lot about a seeker-sensitive church. We need seeker-sensitive Christians who are going to show the world that living life as a Christian isn't about trying to teach an elephant how to fly, but trying to teach an eagle how to fly. This new church is going to be open to everyone out there. They're no longer them. It's no longer the enemy out there or those people or them. They are us. And so, like Christ, We are going to need to be a church that, just like Christ, loves Muslims and loves Jews and loves Buddhists and loves Hindus and loves people of every other religion and no religion at all. That understands that these people, especially people of other faiths, they are the people who are most like us in the whole world. These are our beloved dialogue partners who we have the beautiful opportunity to talk about what we believe and what they believe and see what the differences and the similarities are as we discuss all of this together. One of the things I've always loved about BPC is that we've always said that wherever you are or you aren't on your spiritual faith, wherever you are in what you believe or don't believe about God, you are welcome here. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to preach a very bold, alive, life-giving, centrist Christian gospel. But what it means is if you are at all interested in hearing about that, we are honored to have you along for any or all of this ride. Right? I don't know what the church of the future is going to look like, but I do know that it's going to be more invitational and relational. The days are over where we as Presbyterians can just move into the largest cities of this country and buy property at the most prominent corners of the most prominent cities, and Fifth Avenue in New York and Michigan Avenue in Chicago and right there in downtown Dallas. Well, maybe they can still do it in Dallas. San Vicente Boulevard in West Los Angeles, and just have this edifice, this fortified citadel that we just open the doors and then expect people to come and flock in and thank us for the privilege. We are going to need to be out there talking about the difference that God and faith makes in our life, helping people to understand that this could be the thing that everybody is searching for, finding ways to be invitational. It's something that, it's not that we don't do it, but we need to do it and do it well again. When I was first coming into the church, when I was coming into the youth program, I was overwhelmed at the relationships in the church. We need to be a place where people find community like they don't find anywhere else, where they find what real friendships are about, the ways that people can be there for each other and respect each other and love each other and work together even through differences. We need to be the kind of place like it was for my youth group. I would come and they'd be like, so you coming back next week? And I'd be like, I think, no, you have to come back. Do you come on Sunday nights? We have outreach on Sunday nights. Well, I haven't really thought. I'll come and pick you up. Changed my life. Completely changed everything for me. And people are waiting for us to do the same for them. I don't know what this church exactly is going to be like, but I know it's going to be more relevant and missional. That term gets thrown out a lot. It's kind of taken storm over our country and our world, this missional church movement. We had Darrell Guter, the man who began this term by writing a book, The Missional Church. We had him come and speak at a covenant group of mine in New Jersey. We went to Princeton, and Darrell came and spent the weekend with us, and he said that when he was first writing the book, the way that he would summarize what he meant by this missional church movement is that the Church of Jesus Christ doesn't have a mission in this world. The Church of Jesus Christ is a mission in this world. That's all we are. It's the only reason we exist. That we exist for two reasons and two reasons only. One, to preach the gospel to people so people can be healed and made whole. And two, to lovingly serve the community around us. To lovingly serve people around us. It's another one of the things that I so love about BPC is I've always felt like this church has been involved in whatever are really the most important things that need to be done in the community and around the world. Whether it's going down to the border of this state to help build houses in Tijuana, Mexico, or it's helping to get runaway teenagers off the streets of Hollywood and into housing, whether it's to help abused moms and their children find a safe place to land through Westminster Transitional Living Center. In recent years, I've been just so delighted that we've helped to resettle a Syrian refugee family right here in Los Angeles, that we've gotten involved through Music Men's Minds, bringing people this issue that's touching more and more of our lives and more of the people we love, bringing them here twice a week so that they can remember who they are. I love that through TGS, the Giving Spirit, that we are involved in what's probably the biggest crisis of all in this city at this moment in time in our history. The homeless situation, which has taken this city by storm. I was at a prayer breakfast in Mayor Garcetti's backyard. He invited faith leaders to come to his backyard to have a prayer breakfast about homelessness. And he basically begged us as faith communities to help try to solve this, to do whatever we can. I love that we're involved with TGS and that Mayor Garcetti is very excited about what they're doing, but I'd love to see us do more. I would love to be one of those churches that once a month opens our fellowship hall to allow homeless people to sleep on cots in our fellowship hall, feed them a meal, and have people who stay and host them overnight. Mayor Garcetti was talking about this safe parking program that they have, that 1/3 of the people who are homeless in Los Angeles are actually living in their cars. And that just to have a safe parking lot where people can go and spend the night in their own cars would make a huge difference. Could you imagine if 1 or 2 nights a month we allowed a certain amount of people to come and park in our parking garage with those safe gates? We had a security guard there and maybe a porta potty overnight or something. How could we be involved right here in our community with the things that are happening? I feel like it's what BPC has always done, and I'd love to see us just do it more and more and more. Is there a way that we could get involved in one of the public schools that doesn't get enough financing and go and do something that they need done so that our community knows that we care? What are the maps for this future church going to look like? Buzz McCoy last week reminded me of one of my favorite stories from my old professor and mentor, Tony Campolo. One time he was preaching at a church in Honolulu, the poor guy. And the first night that he arrived, he woke up super early because of the jet lag, and so he went out and he walked into a kind of grimy, rundown diner in a bad part of town to get some food, 24-hour diner. And he sat down at the counter, and there weren't very many people there. The owner was there, and there were these 3 women at the end of the counter who he could tell pretty quickly were prostitutes. They were talking about their night and their johns and what was going on, and he just kind of overheard this conversation. And the youngest one said to the other 2, just so you know, it's my birthday tomorrow. And the oldest one said, whoop-de-doo, what do you want us to do about it? Throw you a party? And the young woman said, geez, no, I've never had a party in my entire life. I wouldn't expect a party. I was just saying, my gosh, leave me alone. A little while later, they left, and Tony had this idea. He called the owner of the diner over to him, and he said, do those women come in here every night? And the owner kind of rolled his eyes and said, oh yeah, every single night. And he said, do you know that one of them's having a birthday party? And the owner was like, oh, or having a birthday tomorrow? And the owner was like, oh. And Tony said, what do you say we throw a birthday party for her? And the owner of the diner was like, that's a great idea. I'll tell you what, I make these amazing hors d'oeuvres. I'll make my famous hors d'oeuvres. My wife, I'm sure she would love to decorate this place. And Tony says, okay, I'll get the cake. Let's meet here and we'll get everything set up at 2:30 tomorrow morning. And so Tony went back and he went and he preached at the church that he was there to preach at, where they open the doors and expect people to flock in to hear some old white dude talk about God. And then afterwards, he went back to the hotel and he went to bed early and he set his alarm clock for 2 a.m. And he got up and he got the cake and he showed up at the diner at 2:30 and they already had all the decorations up and the hors d'oeuvres were out on the counter. And like clockwork at 3:30 a.m., these women walked into the diner and they yelled, surprise! And they sang her a happy birthday and they brought out the cake and everybody sang and she blew out the candles and she had tears streaming down her face. And as they were about to cut the cake, she said, hold on, wait. Before you cut it, I know this is going to sound crazy, but would you mind, it'll just take me a few minutes, do you mind? My mom lives about a block away from here. I have never had a birthday cake in my whole life. Can I please just go and show it to her, and then I'll come right back? And they're all like, okay. So she takes the cake and she disappears out the door, leaving the other two prostitutes and the owner and his wife and Tony and a couple of drunk guys at the other end of the counter. It was kind of an awkward moment, and so Tony says, can we say a prayer? And they're like, that's kind of weird, but sure. And he said this beautiful, simple prayer, thanking God for the owner of this diner, thanking God for his wife, thanking God for this moment and for these other women, asking God's protection over them. And when he was finished praying, the owner said, you didn't tell me you were a Christian. And Tony said, yeah. He said, what kind of church do you go to anyway? And Tony, in a moment of inspiration, said, the kind of church that throws birthday parties for prostitutes at 3:30 a.m. And the man got really choked up. And through his tears, he said, no, you don't. Don't even try to tell me that. There is no church like that. Don't you tell me that you go to a church. There is no church. If a church like that existed, I'd be going to church. There is a church like that. At the corner of Bundy Drive and San Vicente Boulevard in West Los Angeles. And in this new era, with all of the tectonic shifts that are happening in our civilization, in our world, in our society, may we become more and more that kind of church every single day. Amen.